Hey, thank you for tuning in the Inquisitive Minds podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Johnny Smith. My guest today is a not a former, but an Air Force veteran, a chef, a comedian, and I didn't know this till recently, a painter.
Yeah.
Karl Prohaska.
Hello, Johnny.
Welcome to the program, brother. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking at my face in the monitor there, and Jesus, I look like I got a cherry tomato on as a head.
Well, I'm looking at you, and it's looking like 10 years into the future. So that's that. How are you doing today, man? How you been?
I'm good. I woke up relatively hungover free this morning. I did a catering event last night and forgot to eat.
Oh.
Yeah, well, that's always a nice surprise when you realize you've gone most of the way through a bottle of Jack Daniels and you're like, why am I so hammered?
Yeah.
But I'm good. It's a weird Pittsburgh weather for December. It was like 60 yesterday.
It was beautiful. I wore sandals.
Did you really?
I did. I did. Just because I was like, fuck these socks. So let's get it started. You're originally from here.
Yep.
And then when did you join the Air Force? Because I'm assuming that plays into your moving.
Yeah. I grew up in Lower Burrell, and went to college. I went to Slippery Rock for a year. Came home, and my parents wanted me to go to college. My dad was one of those old school, you are nothing unless you get a college degree. And when I went to Slippery Rock, all I did was party. And I was wasting my parents' money, so I joined the Air Force.
What are we looking at, mid-'80s here?
Early 80s.
Early 80s?
83. I joined the Air Force in 84. And I always tell people I basically left home and I never came back.
So when you joined, that was your decision?
Yeah.
And your parents, they not against it? Or?
They were not pleased.
Okay.
My dad especially. But I needed to grow up. And I wasn't doing that in college. My folks were really, I don't want to say strict, but I had a lot of rules. And I went to college and I didn't have any rules. I went nuts.
Yeah. Did you come from a religious background?
No, not particularly.
Just strict in general?
Just very strict.
Okay.
My friends, a lot of my friends grew up with folks who were like, oh, it's okay, just call us and let us know where you are. My dad was like, you're in the house at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
His great favorite phrase was, you may be earlier, but you will not be later.
My mom used to call me and ask if I was still alive. You're not arrested or dead yet? I heard sirens. No, I'm fine, Mom.
But I went to college and I went a little nuts, and I wanted something else to do, so I joined the Air Force. I spent 10 years in the Air Force.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and after that, got into working bars and restaurants, went to chef school, and basically I spent probably 34, 35 years away from the area.
Now, that's interesting because I had assumed just from like the timeline of things I know about you. So you're cooking. What was your role then in the Air Force? What did you do for?
I was a military cop.
Oh, okay.
I was a security policeman in the Air Force.
Okay, that's a good fit.
I went to college and thought I knew everything there was to know about drinking and swearing. Mm-hmm. And then I joined the military and realized I knew nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I spent 10 years as a military policeman, and I didn't want to do that when I got out. It's being a military cop. You get to see all the crime, but it's rare. I saw suicides. I worked child abuse and stuff like that. But as a regular cop, that's every day.
My question for you, because I don't know much about military police, are you like policing the base, or is yes. That's where you're policing?
Yeah, the way I likened it, because I was in the Air Force. It is like being a small town cop.
Okay.
We have everything that our base had everything that a regular small town would have. And you do just basic law enforcement, speed limits and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
Theft, accident investigation. But the real violent stuff, you don't see an awful lot of. And I knew from the limited exposure I had to that, it's not something I wanted to have to deal with every day.
That's
so
fair.
that's what got me back into bartending and bar managing, and eventually bar managing turned into kitchen managing, and then I went to chef school and learned the profession.
Real quick before we move on to that, because that's very interesting too. I love seeing your Facebook posts and everything about it. Where were you based at when you were in the Air Force, and where did you travel to?
Let's see. I was in Montgomery, Alabama for 6 years.
Shout out to Andreas O'Rourke, last week's episode, from Alabama.
Andreas is from Alabama?
Yeah, he's from Alabama.
I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years.
Mobile, Alabama.
Okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
'Cause he's got that kind of beachy coastal vibe.
Yeah, like hippie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not Montgomery.
No. Well,
there's a comedian that used to call that Darwin's waiting room, and he's not really far off.
Yeah, he talks about the struggles of growing up there.
Yeah.
And it was a real rough spot for him, and I think he moved to PA around age 18.
Oh, okay.
So, but yeah, he grew up there and out the mud and all that jazz.
Right. And I let's see, while I was in Montgomery, Alabama, I got to spend 6 months in Egypt.
Oh.
Which was incredible.
Oh yeah, I bet.
It was unbelievable. You really, growing up as white bread suburban as I did, it was a real eye opener. You go to these quote unquote third world countries, and these bizarre owners who are don't have the classic college education and all that. But we went to this bazaar. The bazaar owner spoke 5 languages.
Oh, that's impressive.
And just shifted from one to the other. And it's just like, wow, it was a real eye opener to a much larger world. Because I went from Pennsylvania to Alabama, which was an eye opener in and of itself, but then spending time in Egypt. After Alabama, I went to Alaska for a year, which is also incredible. And
wow, now since you're a chef now, while you were doing these travels, would you have considered yourself a foodie?
No.
Okay, so
no,
okay.
I would never really went out. My parents were, I don't want to say foodies, but they liked a broad spectrum of foods. Mm-hmm. I wasn't one of those kids that grew up with, especially in this area, grew up with meatloaf on Wednesdays and steaks on, we did have steaks on Sundays because that was my dad. That was his contribution to the cooking. But it's like they liked seafood. They liked Asian food. But I wouldn't have considered myself a foodie. Mm-hmm. I got to try a lot of things in different parts of the world, which was interesting, and that was the beginning steps of it.
Okay.
And then Alaska for a year, which again was incredible. And then I was in upstate New York at Plattsburgh, which is just south of the Canadian border.
Okay.
For 3 years, the final 3 years. While I was there, I spent time in Spain. And then I spent time in France too. So it was a wonderful thing. The Air Force made me. A lot of people will debate this, but it made me grow up.
That's fair.
And there's a lot of people who are like they did a shitty job, but it taught me. I needed, for that period of my life, I needed someone to tell me where to be someplace and don't do this and don't do that, because I probably would have spun out of control.